Hi, I'm Brian Buchalter, NCSM's Director of Professional Learning, and welcome to Learning with Leaders. We're all math people. Thank you for joining me and my co-host, NCSM President Katie Arrington, as we talk with bold leaders and influencers about their math journeys and contributions. Today, we will hear from our special guest about their inspiration, perceptions, and insights about instructional decisions that make mathematics welcoming and engaging to a broad audience. Listen and learn about how beliefs, practices, and policies must continue to advance to ensure that each and every person sees themselves as a capable and powerful mathematical thinker.
Hello, listeners. I'm Katie Arrington, and welcome to the NCSM podcast, Learning with Leaders. Continuing our series, We're All Math People, today's episode features the story of one NCSM member's successful efforts in building a county-wide coaching network. Without further ado, let's introduce you to today's special guest. Dr. Jason Gauthier currently serves as the mathematics education consultant for a regional education service agency in Southwest Michigan. In his 12 years there, Jason has offered professional learning, leadership, and consultation services to K-12 mathematics educators in the county and in virtually all areas related to mathematics education. Whether curriculum, instruction, assessment, or intervention related, he has helped educators dig deep into new practices and structures to support their work. Jason is also a former NCSM board member, having served both as the Central 1 Regional Director and the Professional Learning Co-Director. He had the unique and exciting opportunity to be on the writing team for NCSM's first Essential Actions book, Coaching in Mathematics Education. And he continues to work in the area of mathematics instructional coaching with a focus on both coaching itself and the systems that support it.
Yay, so welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. We're excited about this.
As am I.
So let's start here. Although Katie gave us a little insight into your most recent work, will you share with our listeners a little about your journeys in teaching that have led to your current contributions?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it seems like ages ago now, I started life as a high school teacher, high school algebra specifically. And then I gradually made my way into the professional development world. And I spent some time in grad school, like revitalizing my practice and revamping it. And there's certain watershed moments that still stick with me through all of that. And it's basically become my goal over the course of my time to provide other people with watershed moments like that, experiences that will stick with them and can help change who they are as a person and their relationship with both mathematics and teaching mathematics.
Awesome. Well, Jason, I know at last year's NCSM annual conference in Washington, D.C., you facilitated a session titled Building a County-Wide Instructional Coaching Network, a story of putting NCSM's essential actions for coaching into practice. Tell us about your experience sharing your story at the annual conference. What was that like for you?
Well, it was a blast, obviously. I mean, NCSM is a fantastic conference, and it is the one that I look forward to every year. But beyond that, I mean, it was a pleasant surprise. I had a full session because who am I? People don't know me, but I had a full session, and we had a great time. It was my intention to share one. This is an example. This is work I've done and tried to support the coaches in my county. I'm not saying it worked. I appreciate you saying it worked, but it was as successful as I could make it. And the thing that I highlighted during the session was a tool set, if you will, because one of the things that the team of consultants I work with in other content areas as well, one thing we discovered as we were doing this work was we're having a lot of great conversations, lots of talk about coaching and the systems and things like that, but nothing was actually making its way back into the schools. And we did our best to get, representation from coaches and administrators who run their coaching programs and things like that. But it just wasn't taking off, and the things we were saying we could do weren't getting done. And so we started developing some tools to be like, okay, let's support you in this work, whatever it is. And one of the main tools was a template that was created about this is what might go into your coaching handbook, if you want to think of it that way. Because if you think about coaching, I read a lot of Jim Knight. I read a lot of the other coaching gurus as well. And I remember reading Jim Knight's books 15 years apart, and both of them start with almost the exact same thing. There's a lot of confusion around what a coach is and what a coach does. And I thought to myself, okay, so that might be something we have to work on then, is like, let's latch on to creating clarity. One of the things I say all the time, I steal from Brene Brown regularly, which is clear as kind. I can't stress it enough. Like I say it over again. And even in the presentation, there's a slide in the presentation that says, the 4 C's of coaching systems. One of them is clarity. One of them is consistency. And the other 3 are communication. Notice that's a total of 5, because communication about roles and creating clarity is really difficult thing to do, as evidenced by Jim Knight, who's been doing this for years, saying the same thing. Like, we still have this clarity problem after years and years of doing the work.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember during the session, I got up on my soapbox once or twice, as I'm wont to do, and I even got an amen. When you get to send messages like, everybody deserves a coach, I got an amen out of that, and I think I should, because that's a message that we spent some time building in the county as well. Was this idea of like, listen, this isn't about fixing educators. This isn't about the fact that you're doing something wrong, so you need a coach. No, you deserve one, because teaching is that complex. Teaching is one of the most complex things a human being can undertake. And without the support of a coach, it's virtually impossible to do something so complex and reflect on it at the same time. And so that's what a lot of this work was centered around, is building the case for coaching. And that's the hard work, is like the coaches and the administrators, all of them bought in relatively quickly. But the question was, how do you build that work back at your district? How do you go back home and say, okay, convince people to work with the coach? And so that's what the tool set was all about, was one, how do you provide support for your coaches? Because like, there's lots of books out there on how to coach, cognitive coaching, like all the different programs and skills and things like that. But there are very few out there on what do you need to have in place in order to have a healthy coaching program and to be able to support your coaches in getting better at what they do. And that's when we wrote the book. We wrote it for that very specific reason, because we had talked to a whole bunch of experts on how to coach, but there weren't a lot of books out there about this is the system and the systemic thinking that surrounds a coaching program and keeps it healthy. Because a lot of my districts, I'll be honest with you, they did exactly what I'm sure is common. We hired some people and told them to go coach.
Preach.
and we know, we know that comes with a whole assortment of problems, one of which happens to be nobody knows what's going on. Yeah. And so that's what the tool set that I highlighted was to try and get people to think about, okay, this is the work you could do before you do that, and get the message out there and kind of, I don't want to say soften up the ground, we'll call it till the soil would be a better reference. Like, get the ground ready to accept coaching and start that culture conversion. Because again, at the end of the day, we're driven by our beliefs, right? And you have to do belief work. Belief work is identity work, and you have to do that work before you can just implement things. Otherwise, it won't. I just had conversations today about how, context is king, right? All politics are local. The environment you're going to send people into determines their success in a lot of ways, more so even than the kind of person they are, though that plays a huge role.
Wow.
See, and you guys got me up in my soapbox already, and I haven't even been 5 minutes into this.
No, I can see why the house was packed for your session at the conference. You're dropping nuggets on us already.
I appreciate that.
Listen, just reflecting on the beginning of my own coaching journey, just so many of the things that you said are just so true. Regardless of where we are in that journey, everyone deserves a coach. Even coaches need some level of support. And so whether that's coming from each other or from, mentors or experienced coaches, just how do we offer the tools? I love that you kept saying the tools, because that just implies that there's work being done, right? You need tools to do work. whether it's physical or figurative. So this is great already. We can already see why everyone enjoyed your session. Okay, I want to rewind just a little bit. So let's talk about this actual coaching network that you helped create, sustained, and shared at the conference. You talked a little bit about, we were saying a lot of things, but things weren't getting done. I want to go back to, the physical beginning of this work. What did this work look like? Especially thinking about someone else who may be in a situation similar to yours. What did it look like? How did it get started? And what made you decide to use NCSM's Essential Actions for Coaching as the vehicle for this work?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I'll go way back. It started honestly when I was given the opportunity to serve on the writing team. Like I chose to work with the committee at the time, the coaching corner committee, because it started with my own beliefs about the value of coaching and the experiences I'd had providing professional learning as a come to me and I will like engage you with experiences, then I'm going to send you back and not support you. So it started back there with this identification of, okay, I need some way for teachers to be supported, like professional learning, workshop style kinds of things where you would go and learn stuff and not have to do it and not have to perform in front of the class right away. They'll always be vital. Like professional learning of that kind will always be part of the system. But what happens when they leave? What's the support teachers have? That's where coaching came in, is okay, this is the person who could help that person take something, whatever it is, and it could be something small from what was learned in a PD or read out of a book or something like that, and say, okay, how do I do this in my own classroom? Because leaving teachers to do that work, I did it by myself for years, and it took me a long time to start to change my practice. And I've always felt like coaches could accelerate that because you've got the support in the moment as you need it to make those changes in this kind of iterative process. So that's where it started. And then we wrote the book, and obviously having written the book, I think it's a great book, so I'm not gonna, but at the same time, I was looking for an opportunity to take that up. And some of my, I work for a county level organization, so I serve a lot of individual local districts. And some of my curriculum directors were starting to talk about coaching a little bit. Some of them had, like one of our districts had coaches, but other ones were showing interest. And I said, okay, well, what can we do to, one, support that interest, and two, for lack of a better term, kind of kick it in the butt a little bit and try and get some momentum going. And so that was this idea of, okay, well, let's bring everybody together. Let's bring in the coaches that we currently have, the administrators that run that coaching program, and then anybody else who's thinking about running a coaching program. And so I went around and I sat with all my curriculum directors individually in meetings and said, okay, so this is what I'm thinking. And are you interested? Yes or no? And all of them said yes, amazingly enough. And of course, this was, just as the pandemic got started. So we ended up having, the first year was actually half a year, and it was like 3 virtual meetings of a couple hours to do some work. And again, like I said earlier, starting with the beliefs, that's one of the reasons that I use this book. One is it's the only book out there that I know of that provides a framework to help think about coaching and coaching systems. And two, we spent a lot of time in the very beginning, I think, making a very good case for why coaching. Why do we do this? And what's the research support behind that? And so I was able to do that, and I was able to get them to suspend disbelief long enough to say, okay, listen, I know this says mathematics coaching, but really, at the end of the day, for a lot of this work in this book, you could take out the word mathematics and just say instructional coaching, and it would be very, very similar in a lot of ways. So I cheated a little bit around that, but at the same time, it's a book that provides that framework, and one of the only ones that I know of. Some have come out since that would be adjacent to this, but there was nothing at the time. Yeah, and so that's what we use. We started, like, people have gravitated to, honestly, when we did, if you remember in the book, there's this pyramid graphic or the temple graphic that talks about this is this. They gravitated toward, they liked that imagery, and it stuck with them and allowed them to have like mental purchase on what we were trying to do and why we were trying to do it. And that, I think, alone made it worth it. let alone everything else. We spent a lot of time on Essential Action 1, which is this commitment to coaching one, and then Essential Action 3, which is understanding use a variety of coaching interactions. We spent a lot of time in those spaces. Honestly, we could have spent all of our time in demonstrated commitment, because that's the hardest part, right? Is committing to it, providing, like you said, Brian, yeah, you got to provide, your coaches provide professional learning to your teachers, but you also have to like provide professional learning for your coaches. You can't just throw them into the pool and say, okay, you guys get to meet once or twice a year. No, there's got to be stuff that goes on with them to grow them in their own profession as well. And that's, I think, a thing that was overlooked. And the book helped us capture some of that for them, at least in an initial message. Year 2 showed that as we kept, like I had my other colleagues are going out in the districts and seeing things in addition to me, and we were all seeing that some of that wasn't making the cut, wasn't making the transition back. And so that's when we started to develop the tool set to go with it.
Nice. And I have to agree with you. I love that graphic in the coaching in mathematics education essential action series, that graphic of the pillars and the foundation, and what's the foundations that it takes to build our practices, and then who are we supporting through our practices. How's this benefiting our coaches, our teachers, our students, our leaders. So if you haven't, listeners, if you haven't checked out at least that, I don't even know what to call it. What do you call it, Jason?
We ended up thinking of it as our logic model, right? Because it explains, like, there's a set of foundational elements to this. There's stuff that you do, but all of it is in service of the people. And specifically at the very top, everything is meant to get back to the student level and help students learn mathematics, learn more mathematics, and have a better relationship with mathematics. And so that helped us. And I thank you for bringing up the foundational elements again, because that's where we started with the work, honestly. Is, yeah, we spent some time in the essential actions, but before we did that, we spent time with beliefs, vision, and equity, and talking about, and in relationships they continue to be a thing. Like, everybody agrees about the relationship piece and how vital it is. So we haven't had to spend time building understanding around that. That just keeps coming up. But we examined some beliefs first and really tried to interrogate, okay, do you actually believe that everybody deserves a coach? Do your teachers believe that they deserve a coach? Can you make that pitch to them and they'll buy it? I cannot remember the man's name. It's a TED Talk. And there's a shortened version of it, but he's a surgeon, and he talks about his experiences. His name is Dr. I believe it's Atul, and I don't remember his last name. But one quote that has always stuck with me from his TED Talk was, "It's not about how good you are, it's about how good you could be."
Ooh, where my
Like, okay, I'm gonna live that one for a minute. Like, yeah, that was that one got me. That one got me. And so we've used that TED Talk a couple different times to talk about this idea that even surgeons benefit from this kind of work.
Yeah.
And so it's worth it.
I will make a confession that I have done this deep dive into the Netflix series that have been coming out lately around like the top 5 tennis players in the world and the top 5 golf players in the world, and right, like even F1 drivers. And I'm struck by the fact that every single one of them, very successful, top of their game, they all have coaches. They all have coaches that are watching them, that are saying, here's how you could tweak and get just a little bit better and get a little bit more impact. And I feel like it makes so much sense in those other contexts, but sometimes we don't apply that in our own world, right? Why doesn't it make sense that teachers need coaches and coaches need coaches? And it's not about doing something wrong. It's exactly what you said. It's about reaching that potential, right?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So Jason, in all this work that you've been doing, helping to write this book, enacting all of these things in your context, what have you learned about supporting coaches? What are some of your tried and true practices or systems or mindsets? What do you think are like the most important things to think about when you're thinking about coaching?
Yeah, that's a good one. If I had to pick just a few, so this is going to be a short list because it's such a big list. Honestly, clarity of roles is something that in almost every system coaches struggle with, especially because a lot of systems um, in contexts like mine, where my schools are relatively small, some positions are split between a coach and an interventionist, what AMTE would call a specialist, right? Someone who could work with students and teachers. And if you don't have clarity of roles about who does what, when, why, all of that stuff, that creates friction, especially if a couple of my districts, they had both an interventionist and a coach. And, when you hear stories about, people yelling at each other because they think they're taking their job, it's those are the kinds of things you don't ever want to hear. You don't want to hear those kinds of friction, those kinds of struggles. So creating clarity is a key. And it came down to simple as, yeah, they created a list. This is what the coach does. This is what the interventionist does. This is what the principal does. And right or wrong, whatever, because again, at the end of the day, there aren't any right answers to this. But as long as everybody knows what's expected of everybody, themselves and everybody else, the friction is so much less. So clarity is one, absolutely a vital thing.
I love that. You mentioned Brene Brown earlier and her Clear is Kind. I will say she's a hero of mine. She work at the same university she works at, and someday I hope, like, all of my fingers and toes crossed to meet her, because I love this idea of clarity, right? It just makes everything else easier. It allows you to focus on what you really need to focus on. So I love that.
And she has some great things too, in addition to that, like her treatise on trust. I think it's the 5 components. I can't remember all of them, but like that particular talk she gave about trust was hugely influential in some of the work we've done as well, about like, listen, yeah, we all agree that relationships are a thing and they're important. They're the vehicle through which coaching is delivered, and they're super important, but that doesn't tell us how to build them. And so we've talked at length about trust and confidentiality and how do we maintain that. So having those conversations, and again, clarity is related to that, right? Like, you have to be clear. The conversation that's happening in our county right now is like, what do coaches tell principals? How much? Right?
Yep.
And I literally just had a gym night video come across my desk, across my email, where he talks about that. And I'll be honest with you, he surprised me, because my inclination was like, the coach is not going to tell the principal very much at all. Might talk in general terms about what you're working on with teachers, things like that. I wasn't even sure that I was okay with the coach revealing who they work with. Jim is. He thought that the principal should know who the coaches are working with and what they're working on, but that's it. And again, at the end of the day, right or wrong, however you feel about it, as long as everybody knows that's all that the principal knows, because the principal is your boss, your evaluator. Again, clarity is key, right? As long as everybody knows the answer you choose is the answer you choose. And there are costs and benefits associated with each one of them. So yeah, trust and clarity are 2 of the things. And again, it can be as simple as creating a document together. It's all about collaboration, right? These things, documents are only as good as the processes used to create them. And so when you've got a coaching team, it shouldn't just include the coaches, it should be the administrators. And I would argue you probably want to have some teacher representation on there too, because you got to have a group that is representative.
Yeah.
To represent the interests of all of this, of the other groups that are being affected by the thing you're talking about, in this case, coaching. And yeah, then everybody can walk out of there with consensus. And this is one of the other things we talk about too when it comes to meetings like this. Consensus doesn't mean 100% agreement, does it? Consensus means everybody has had the chance to have their say, the will of the group, we know what it is, and everybody can walk out and say that they support publicly the thing that we decided. You might not agree with it privately, but you can walk out the door and say, yep, I'm okay with this for right now.
Right.
And that's hard. So that was the other issue too, was when you build coaching systems, you have to have teams to support that. So what have I talked about so far? Clarity, trust, and team-based leadership, if you want to think of it that way, because those are the things that let you create consensus around moving forward.
Those sound like good big ideas.
Yes, I love it. Listen, I love, TV, movies, and all those things. And as you were talking, I kind of was getting this image of, we all build these movies in our head, right? You have a vision of how you want things to play out and how you interpret it. But until we share the script with all of the actors, right, we don't have that clarity. We can't build the trust. We can't build the relationships that we need to make the movie happen, right? So I love those key features you hit on: the trust and the clarity and the teamwork. Man, I can't believe we're here at this point already. It's my least favorite part of the podcast, only because it means we're down to our last question. So we have to ask you as we wrap up before you leave, since our podcast theme for this series is "We are all math people," what would you say or what would you offer to the person who might think, math isn't my thing, I'm not a math person?
Yeah, I hear it all the time, right?
Yeah, often than I.
You're not a math person yet. There's a
Oh,
math person hiding inside of all of us somewhere. There is some piece of mathematics that I think each and every one of us would find fascinating. And like professional learning, it's all about experiences, right? Our identities in a lot of ways are the sum of our experiences. And so I'd argue someone who says, I'm not a math person, has not had a set of experiences that would let them see themselves as a math person. Because in the end, it's a sad thing to say, but there's a distinct difference between school mathematics and real mathematics. And oftentimes school mathematics leaves us with an impoverished picture of what mathematics could be. I mean, there's when you take away the pressure, when you take away the tests, when you take away you have to learn this now and I don't care about it. If you just summon a little bit of interest about something mathematical and play with it for a minute and let yourself be free of that like anxiety that school creates in a lot of us around that, I think a lot of people would discover that they are math people, or at least more of a math person than they thought they were.
Yeah, I've got a maraca this.
I think this is a record, Jason. You got 4 maracas through.
Wow, I'm honored.
Pretty sure that's setting the standard for Yes, absolutely. I love this idea of, there's a big difference between school math and real world math, and everybody is capable of doing math. In fact, everybody does it, whether they think they do or not. And it's about the experiences we're providing. And are we building folks with a sum of experiences that leads them to that identity of seeing the math in themselves? I love it. I love it. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being here. We were so excited to have you. And I think you've shared so many ideas and insights that people are just going to love. So before we leave, I'll take the role of doing the shameless plug for the NCSM Essential Action series, of which you helped to write the first one, which is the Essential Actions in Coaching, which you can find on the NCSM site under Leadership Resources. You can just search for NCSM Essential Actions and you can find it. But where can we find out more about the work you were talking about the countywide coaching network, or some other resources people might want to know that you've used in coaching?
Yeah, the easiest way to do that is to email me, and I'm more than happy, as you can see through this podcast, to talk about the work that I do. Email me. I believe my Twitter handle is going to be attached to the podcast as well. I think it's at jgauthier13. I'm more than willing to connect and talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. I'm also in the presentation that I gave at NCSM, all of the resources that I had them work through, they're shared. They're not, I mean, it'd be great if you cite the source and tell people that it was me that you heard it from, but you can take them, make them yours. They're there for that. So I'm willing to share anything that we've done as well, because again, I'm not going to pretend like it's perfect, but it's a start, and I'm hoping it can help people.
Awesome. I bet a lot of people are going to find a lot of worth in those resources. We will make sure that your contact information is posted along with the podcast information, so everybody knows how to get a hold of you. And just thank you so much for sharing your experiences and expertise with us today.
Well, thank you both for having me. It was an honor.
Absolutely. We hope that you have been inspired by this bold mathematics leadership conversation and will tune into our podcast series each month. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. You can learn more about NCSM, Leadership in Mathematics Education, and our upcoming professional learning events on the NCSM website, mathedleadership.org. You can also follow NCSM on Twitter at mathedleaders and using the hashtag NCSMBold. Until next time.